Hey everyone, how's it going? This is the Orange and Black Insider Bengals podcast. I am Anthony Cosenza, and I'm joined by my usual partner in crime, and he's juggling a lot at his house, folks. Scott Schulte. You can hear the background. How are you, sir?
I'm sorry, it's hard hearing you.
Exactly. I asked how you're doing.
Oh, doing pretty good, except I'm still waiting for spring. We had snow yesterday when I went to work, so yeah. And I decided to wear my best farming shirt because it's farming season here in Ohio. So I'm kind of hoping that the weather clears up. You know, we get some planting and plowing in. I can get some healthy people at home. You know, we can watch the draft next week, and yeah, kind of hoping everything gets better.
Awesome. Well, we'll try and not preoccupy you too much, my friend. I know you've got a lot going on there. We do have a special guest, and before we bring him in, we haven't done a question of the night for a long time, and usually you would think we're just a bunch of overweight dudes doing this show based on all of the dessert talk and all this stuff that is usually our forte, or at least Scott's forte. Scott's kind of the resident dessert guy. But the question we threw out, and I'm going to ask our special guest, the question we threw out earlier today, it's about licorice, and God only knows why that came to mind. I guess I saw a Twizzlers commercial, and it kind of made me think, I wonder how people prefer their licorice. And so I had red vines, black licorice, Twizzlers, or licorice is gross. I guess my preference would probably actually be black licorice. I don't know. Let's kick it over to our special guest, John Sheeran. John, are you a licorice guy?
Out of those options, it has to be Twizzlers. I just think they're
really,
yeah. I'm not a huge licorice guy myself, but like Twizzlers is like my go-to like car snack, I guess. Like if I'm just in the car for a long time, Twizzlers is like a good snack to just chew on. I guess it tastes okay, but I'm not a huge licorice guy, so I'm probably not the best guy to ask this.
Well, you're in good company, my friend, because 52% so far in our Twitter poll are saying that Twizzlers is their choice as well. I was a little surprised because someone had said that red vines is not really an East Coast thing. Is that true?
I've never even heard of red vines, to be honest with you. Like, I don't even know what that is. I'm not a huge licorice guy, so.
Really? Okay. Yeah. Well, it's popular out here, at least. It's popular out here, and it's kind of a cherry. They come in like the big tub. Yeah, so it's kind of a Costco thing. Anyways, for the listeners, have a little fun with us. If you like licorice, or if you don't care, I don't know. Just vote or cast your vote in the chat room. Silly question, but we like to have a question of the night every once in a while. But as I mentioned, we are joined by John Sheeran. John is with SB Nation and CincyJungle.com, as Scott Schulte and I are as well. And he is kind of the resident film breakdown guy. He does a lot of in-depth analysis and does a really good job. I enjoy reading a lot of your stuff, John. Why don't you give the listeners a little bit of background on yourself and your history with the Cincinnati Bengals. Obviously, you're a fan. You told me before we took the air that you're going to UC, and when you joined Cincy Jungle, all that good stuff.
Yeah, so I mean, I was born in a hospital that was 2 miles where I am right now. I'm born and raised in Cincinnati. My mom was a Steelers fan. She's a diehard Steelers fan. Her parents were Steelers fans. And there was a picture of me with a Steelers sweater on when I was like 2 years old. So I was like born and raised to become a Steelers fan in Cincinnati, Ohio. That was just not going to cut it. My friends, when I was like 5 or 6, they were big Bengals fans. They introduced me to the team, introduced me to the orange and the helmet. Really was what kicked me off into that fandom. So by the time Marvin came here, I was pretty much a Bengals fan, and my mom didn't like that. So I grew up a Bengals fan for my childhood. And then, I was a casual fan, just like growing up, but, the more I watched it, the more in depth I got involved in the game and whatnot. I didn't really start like breaking down film until I got, more into high school, I guess. And even still, I didn't really know what I was doing, but it just became a lot of just really being a sponge for the game and just really just picking up all this knowledge and just following all these different people and, just picking up all this different information about what you're seeing on the film and just, kind of putting two and two together. And it was really that passion for the Bengals that really got me passionate about football. And now it kind of feels like that my passion for the game has almost outweighed the passion for the Bengals almost. But the Bengals fandom has always been there, and it's always kind of like my base, I guess. And, growing up and still living in Cincinnati, it's still always going to be something that's a part of me for sure.
Awesome. Well, it's great to have you on. It's long overdue. And then, my friend, I try and book guests, at least a few times a month when we do this show. And you've been on the radar, and unfortunately, I dropped the ball a little bit. But we have you now. You're welcome to stay the entire program if you'd like, or if you want to talk about a few things and bounce. Completely up to you. I know you're on the mend a little bit from being under the weather, so your call. But we want to talk to you about current Bengals on the roster, things you've seen on film. Rookies that could be joining the Bengals. A lot of names are being connected with them, be it through visits, be it through, positional need, that sort of thing. We want to talk about that. And for those who are tuning in live, if you have a question, we are going to take some listener questions at the end of the show to answer on the air. But if you have some questions specifically for John and what we are talking about, we'll try and get to those so he can give his take on that. John, I'm going to start with the right tackle position. And the Cincinnati Bengals this offseason are in the midst of a lot of change on the offensive line. They added Cordy Glenn as a left tackle. Common knowledge, we talked about this before we took the air here, but common knowledge is that center, right guard, and right tackle are pretty open at this point. Now, there's a lot of talk that the Bengals will take a center, perhaps a guard in rounds 1 and or 2. Strong possibility, maybe a tackle in there. But they have 3 guys on the roster, Cedric Ogbuehi, Jake Fisher, and then they acquired Bobby Hart. Now, obviously, I love how you had to clear the throat when you talked about
that was a legit cough, though. It was just
I thought you were Bobby Hart. Yeah. Those are guys that they may be in play to start at right tackle this year if the Bengals don't address tackle in the draft, or maybe they are planning with one of those 3. Now, who, based on film study that you've seen, who of those 3 are you most confident in, based on their history and all of that, to man the right tackle spot?
It's like it's a 3-man race, but it's really only a 1-man race. There's no way that Bobby Hart at this point is anywhere close to being a caliber NFL starter. When the Bengals signed him and then Rebecca asked me to watch film on him, I was like, please don't make me do this. Like I drank like 6 IPAs before I started watching that film, and it still wasn't any better. He was just abysmal for the Giants last season. And the first game I watched was against the Dallas Cowboys, and I'm thinking Frank Pollock is on the sideline right now watching this stuff go down, and he joins the Bengals the next offseason and then is okay with bringing this guy aboard. Like, he's 22 years old, but he was never meant to play tackle in the NFL. He tested like a very below average guard coming out of Florida State. He's about 320 pounds, 330 pounds coming out of Florida State. Doesn't have a lick of athleticism, doesn't have a lick of any technique in his hands. He's just not a good right tackle, and honestly, he shouldn't really make the roster in the first place by the time September comes around. And then Ogbuehi, people said, oh, but he wasn't comfortable with right tackle. He was more comfortable at left tackle. That's where he was good at Texas A&M. He wasn't really good at either of those positions at Texas A&M. He was actually really better as a guard in college. So I don't think moving him back to right tackle is going to be the best thing for him. I think you should just keep him at left tackle just as, compete as a backup in camp. If he doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. He's already a 4th-year player. You have options with him. I think the favorite has got to be Jake Fisher, because Fisher's bad reps at 3 years in, they're almost as bad as Ogbuehi's, but it's not from a lack of functional strength. It's not from a lack of just any of the weaknesses that Ogbuehi has. It's really a lot of technique. And one of the main things that Frank Pollock, the new offensive line coach, is coming in is just a whole new way of just addressing these type of technical issues that we've seen from guys like Russell Bonai and Cedric Ogbuehi just completely falter under Paul Alexander's tutelage, and a way more of an aggressive style of blocking, which is one of the main things that Pollock is coming into with. It's a lot of shorter, quicker passing sets instead of these like vertical sets that we've seen from Ogbuehi. It's a lot less catching hug techniques, a lot more punching, more aggressive pass protection, which really fits Fisher's style a lot more than Abway. I think that's where Fisher's going to get the heads. Is going to get the leg up in that right tackle's position, and I think he's just the better player out of all those three guys.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree with you. If they stick in house for right tackle, I think Jake Fisher is probably the guy that they look at and should win that battle. And maybe he's kind of the swing guy, the backup left tackle, backup right tackle, and then maybe use him in jumbo formations if they decide to do that again this year. Again, that's kind of up to Frank Pollock and Bill Lazor, the offensive coordinator. And just to kind of side note of what you're talking about with Frank piece on there about some of the sights and sounds from spring workouts, and a lot of the offensive linemen on the Paul Alexander regime, they're coming out and saying quite a few nice things, and it seems pretty refreshing. They are reinvigorated, at least by some of the words that they're putting out there. We're going to have a post on that on Cincy Jungle, I believe, Thursday, talking about that, but it is up on Bengals.com currently. Two of the guys that are about Frank Pollock's arrival in Cincinnati are Alex Redmond and Christian Westerman. So I'm going to kind of ask a similar question about possible in-house candidates to get a job. If it's, say, they get maybe Mike McGlinchey in the first round, and then they address center in the second or third round. Which one of those two are you more confident maybe taking over right guard? And can Westerman to be an NFL starter at center?
I think if it's just between Westerman and Redmond, I think Westerman's got the leg up just because he's more of a natural athlete. And I think with Pollock, you're looking at a scheme that's way more reliant on zone and just space blocking. That fits Westerman's game a lot more than Redmond. Is more just that gap scheme that kind of you're kind of like you're just classic power blocker and whatnot. But I think we can't forget about Trey Hopkins. I think Trey Hopkins is a better guard than Alex Redmond at this point. I think that he should. If there's a two-man competition for that right guard spot, I think it should be between Hopkins and Westerman, and not Westerman and Redmond. I think Redmond should compete for a roster spot, but I think the Hopkins should have some type of a leg up over Redmond in that specific case.
So, John, this question might be a little off the wall. It's some of the guys we just talked about, but looking at what Dallas had done, I guess last year they moved La'el Collins from left guard after a couple seasons to right tackle when Doug Free left. Mm-hmm. Based on what you've seen with the guys we just talked about, Redmond, Westerman, Hopkins, so forth, because we kind of figure, Bowling's essentially got the left guard spot locked up. Any guys could move to right tackle with as bad as we just kind of mentioned of Wahi and Fisher have been on the right side. Or is that just not in the cards for them?
I'm sorry. Who did you say could move?
The guards. So the guys like Westerman, Hopkins, or Redmond, the guys who are essentially, instead of them all fighting for the right guard or center spot, could any of them push Fisher or Abwehi for the right tackle spot?
I think if you want to do something like that, then maybe you consider like an Isaiah Wynn, because they're about the same size. I think guys like Westerman and Redmond, I think you got to stick them inside. Maybe try one of them in center if you don't find a center early. I don't think moving them out the tackle is going to do any good for them. I think athletically and physically they're just more suited for just the inside. I think with Clint Bowling, you could have done that because he has a little more length. He did that at Georgia, and that's kind of why he was like the emergency guy. But with guys like that who've barely gotten any playing time, you kind of want to just stick over that to where they have been at this point.
This is the Orange and Black Insider Bengals podcast. I'm Anthony Cosenza. I'm joined by Scott Schulte and special guest John Sheeran, talking some Bengals football, current guys on the roster. Going to be talking about a number of other subjects as well. But right now we're talking offensive line, which obviously is the major focus of the Cincinnati Bengals and what they need to rebuild in order to potentially be contenders again, because that's been kind of the Achilles heel of the team the past couple of seasons. Kind of talking about some positives. We're kind of saying, oh, these guys are iffy. Kind of going on the positive side a little bit. What about some of these second and third year guys that have had limited playing time? Either they've flashed already in their limited time, or they haven't really gotten a chance, but the very minimal time, whether it's preseason or whatever, they really give hope, and they should be vying for more time in 2018. I mean, obviously, William Jackson is probably the golden child of this kind of category. I mean, if you're a pro football focused guy, his play was off the charts last year as kind of a number 3, number 4 corner on the team. So I don't know. I kind of talk about some of these guys: William Jackson, Andrew Billings, Jordan Willis, maybe Jordan Evans. Any of those guys maybe have hope, or is it just going to be more of the same for some of these guys who have kind of not been able to get past the depth chart hump?
Yes, I think this was the main question I had with Darqueze Dennard last year. I didn't have a lot of hope that he could salvage a decent year, and he definitely proved me wrong. He was one of the very best nickel cornerbacks in the NFL last season. So there's always hope for these guys who maybe just don't really pull it together for the first 3 years to maybe bring it out in year 4. But even guys who are coming out of year 2 into year 3, there's definitely, as long as they have the actual potential athletically and productive wise, and they've just been, just sticking to the scheme and whatnot. But a guy that Jordan Willis is a guy that I think every fan of the Bengals should keep an eye out, because the defensive line has some questions, because they haven't really replaced Chris Smith yet, and he's the nickel pass rusher, the guy that comes in next to Geno Atkins on third down. He's a candidate to take over for that spot, and that's a role that plays 400, 500 snaps for the defense, and it's a role where he could potentially get a lot more opportunities as a pass rusher, because you already have Carl Lawson taking over for Michael Johnson at right defensive end on those passing downs. Obviously Carlos Dunlap is on the left side, Geno Atkins. So if you can get Willis to potentially take over for that role, that would really suit him as an athlete. It would really give him in a good position to just develop as a pass rusher, because you really need, at this point, you really need Willis to start producing. You can't really expect him to be at the level that Carl Lawson is at the moment, just because Lawson is just a more refined of a pass rusher. But the more you can get Jordan Willis on the field, the better, because he's already a really good run defender. I think I would say he's the second best edge defender on the team right now. But if you can get him to develop more as a pass rusher, I think that would be very good.
We did get a question in the chat, the YouTube chat, and it was from Chris Higdon. Why hasn't Josh Shaw shown those cover skills that once had him as a possible first-round prospect at USC? Obviously, now I think when we know when he came out, there was some very polarizing opinions on him. He's kind of a scheme fit guy. He's got to fit your scheme, and you got to find a place. You got to figure out or whatever. But your thoughts on Shaw based on what you've seen? He's got 1 interception, and I think 3 seasons accrued now. I don't know. Is he going to make a leap? The Bengals want to do more 3 safety looks this year.
Yeah. Well, to go on that point, they're not even they're showing signs that they're not even committed to Iloka long term at this point. So I don't think they have confidence in any of the guys behind the starters in Iloka and Williams. The thing with Shaw is that they started him off as nickel cornerback, and then when they ran out of safety depth, they had him move to safety. And then the main thing that I remember from Shaw last year is when he was he was basically the backup box safety, and he would just get plowed over when trying to defend the run as a box safety. It just did not fit him at all. And I think just as a slot corner, a cover guy, he's okay, but he's not at Dennard's level. I don't think he's gonna, if Dennard goes down, I don't think he's the guy. He's your guy to pick up the pace and pick up the slack for that. I think he's very expendable. He's in the last year of his contract, and I think the Bengals could find a viable replacement in the draft, or at least to push him, because I think there is some talent, because he is still a good athlete. I think he still has skills as just a man-to-man cover guy, but I don't think he's that good of a safety. I definitely don't think that whatever they did last year is good for him in the long term.
John, you had talked about the defensive line a little bit ago, talking about I guess bringing in Willis as that third down guy to replace Smith, who replaced Wilberry, which I guess I'm assuming that makes the front four on third down something like Dunlap, Atkins, Willis, and Lawson. So looking at the guy that's getting replaced in that role, I guess the other defensive tackle between Billings and Glasgow, who are both kind of younger guys. The guy they brought over from Tampa Bay, I think it was Chris Baker, who they signed. Between those, and I guess this is more a question about Billings and Glasgow, because I assume Baker is supposed to be more of a starter with the money they offered him. I know a lot of Bengals fans were really high on Billings. We were pretty stoked when he fell from the first round to the fourth round. He obviously didn't play any 2 years ago. Last year, he played very sparingly. He played a little more as the season wore on. I know he's still very young, so I think some of us are still kind of really young. He's really strong. Right. There's still that hope there, but yet at the same time, it just, it didn't seem like it showed up. And granted, I haven't gone back and watched a lot of the tape after the games, so I haven't had a chance to see other than just what my eyes saw, on the Sundays. Is there anything that you've seen from Billings that maybe, or the coaches are going to find in him, or that, hey, this guy might be this huge steal we thought he was, or is he just this fourth round guy that's a solid rotational 2-down defensive tackle? Where basically what do you see in someone like Billings?
There were times last season where Billings did live up to the hype as a guy that was touted as a top 50 prospect. I remember I specifically did a whole article on his performance against the Jaguars because it was really that dominant. He was really, really good that game. He's really stout against the run. He was even causing some pressure up the middle against a very good interior offensive line in Jacksonville. But there was also some games where he was completely off balance. He was getting completely demolished by double teams, and he looked like a guy who was coming off of a significant knee injury. So last year was a very inconsistent year for Billings. He was still, I think, only 22 years old. I don't even know. I thought he came in the league at 20 years old. Maybe he came in at 21. Yeah. Doesn't matter. He's really, really young. He's really, really strong. And one thing about that is that at Baylor, he played at about 310 pounds, and he tested really well that size. And then coming off this injury, I think he was playing at 325, 330. So I'm not sure that he fully adjusted to playing at that weight. And I'm not sure that playing weight is optimal for him. But if he can adjust to that size, that's obviously the size that Dormata Peko was playing at when he was here. And obviously that worked out pretty well for them. If they can get up to Peko's level, that'll obviously be pretty good because he was a fourth-round pick. I think he can still become that player. I think Baker is just a safekeeping to see if he doesn't take that step. They still have a solid one technique to play next to Gino on first and second down. But I do think that there's still hope for a guy like Billings just because he's so young and he's so naturally gifted.
Agreed. And, his rookie season was a wash. So, yeah. We're basically seeing a guy that's got 16 games under his belt. And, there's a big learning curve. And, a lot of guys on that defense struggled last year. There were some decent plays from Billings completely out of position. The run defense was a mess. And I think obviously aside from the offensive line, that's got to be a major focus Bengals this year. That's why they brought in Baker, and they'll probably be looking at defensive line and linebacker. I would think, with some relatively high picks again this year. We're talking with John Sheeran. He's with SB Nation and CincyJungle.com. I'm Anthony Cosenza. This is the Orange Black Insider and partner in crime, Scott Schultze. John, let's transition now to the draft. Obviously, we're just about a week away from that. The Bengals, I don't want to say they took a little luster out of their first round pick, but moving back from 12 to 21 definitely changes things. And obviously, you kind of get that extra offensive lineman in Cordy Glenn, and then, you do move back a little bit, but they did address at least one of them. So I guess let's start with this. Give me like 3 to 5 of your favorite guys, regardless of position, that are probably day 1, day 2 type of players.
James Daniels, center of Iowa. Maurice Hurst, defensive tackle out of Michigan. I know Ohio State fans are not going to like that. Justin Reed, safety out of Stanford, or safety slot cornerback. kind of give or take on that. Harold Landry is not going to get drafted by the Bengals. He's probably going like mid-first round, but he's the pass rusher out of Boston College. And Jerry Alexander, cornerback out of Louisville. And Bengals fans are going to be scared of that because he's a cornerback. He's going to be taken in the first round. Yeah. He can ball. Those are probably my 5 guys who I will stand for, who are going to be taken very early in the draft.
Okay, so let's talk about you. You mentioned James Daniels. So he's your top true center in this draft. It sounds like there's kind of the big 3, right? There's James Daniels, the center out of Iowa. There is Frank Ragnow, the center out of Arkansas, and Billy Price, the Ohio State kid. All 3 have respective strengths and weaknesses and all of that. What makes to you James Daniels stand out a bit above Ragnow and Price?
There's a few things. One, and I know like some people aren't going to really agree with this, but there's more room for Daniels to grow because he's only 20 years old. Ragnow is going to be 22 in May. Price is going to be 23 in October, I think. And that matters because not only is Daniels younger than them, but there's also room for him to grow physically because he's got longer arms than all 3 of them. He played at 295 at Iowa. He gained 10 pounds for the combine and tested at one of the best. He had one of the best like combine performances at the center position in the history of the event. And that's really significant because athleticism at the center position matters. And I think after watching Russell Bodine for the past 4 years, we should definitely realize that because there were definitely areas of the combine where Bodine did not succeed, specifically in the 3-cone and short shuttle. Whenever we saw Russell Bodine try to reach block or try to out leverage a defensive tackle, it didn't work. And that's because he just wasn't that kind of athlete. James Daniels is the yin to Bodine's yang, if you will. He's the exact opposite kind of guy. He's long, he's athletic, he can do everything that Travis Frederick for the Dallas Cowboys can do. And Frederick wasn't the same exact kind of athlete. He wasn't the same kind of player. But in terms of what Pollock likes his offensive lineman to do, Daniels fits that the most. And he's just that kind of athlete, that kind of Alex Mack, Rodney Hudson kind of guy who can just do any kind of thing that you want from your center. And he's still got a lot of room to grow. And I think that's what separates him from a guy like Ragnow, who's still a really solid player, but he just doesn't have that upside over a guy like Daniels. And the same thing kind of goes to Price, who is not as long as either of those two and just doesn't have as much room to grow.
Yeah, and our good friend Joe Goodberry, I know you guys talk often on Twitter. He's a big James Daniels guy, obviously, and I know he agrees with you in a lot of respects there. Just a quick listener question before I kick it back over to Scott. It was from John Telly, an email we received right before the program. Anthony and Scott, it seems likely that the Bengals will draft a center early and he'll start on day 1. I think that part of the responsibility of the center is to scan the defense and set blocking assignments for the line. Is that something a rookie might have trouble with? Are any of the draftable centers that we're looking at, quote, more pro ready than the others? Should we expect some growing pains? I think based on maybe what you're saying with some of the metrics, the combine metrics and everything that Daniels showed, he's quote, more pro ready. To me, you mentioned he's a little bit smaller than the playing weight of Ragnow and Price. Is it kind of the bigger Mauler type, the more technically sound guy? So anyway, your thoughts on that question from John?
I think when Bodine was here, the biggest issue for him was getting to snap the ball to Dalton. It wasn't really that much to scan the mic. It's not that hard of a thing to do. The thing with Iowa is that they run a very pro style offense in terms of just a lot of blocking schemes and just a lot of route concepts and all the other traditional fluff that you hear about NFL offense. I don't think that Daniels, Ragnow, or Price will have an issue or coming in and being a day 1 starter at the center position from a physical standpoint or an intellectual standpoint. And I think that if the Bengals have first round grades on all those guys, then they would have confidence for any of them to come in on day one and be the starter and take on all those intellectual responsibilities as well. And the thing with Daniels as well, he played at 295. He gained 10 pounds at the combine, but I don't think that he's done growing in that part. I think Ragnow is 315. I think that's where he played. He might have tested 311, but I think Daniels has the potential to get to 315 and maintain that athleticism, which is very crucial.
So staying on the offensive line, and especially center, because we've suffered through Bodine for many years, and it's so nice to see the Bills take him from us after they are the team that just keeps giving. So I guess looking at the prospects, and we tend back here somewhat, not intentionally, but we tend to favor the same people and hate the same people. So it's interesting. You guys both said Price and mentioned Goodberry was big on Price, or not Price. I'm sorry, Daniels, who is also my favorite center.
Yeah.
A lot of people in Cincy Jungle really like Price. He's obviously a local guy. He's an Ohio State guy.
Yeah.
Personally, I think I have him as like my fourth best center. I guess my first question is, where would you put him in that list? Is he kind of your number two, right behind Daniels? Is he kind of further down? And I guess I asked this because when I watch his tape, he just looks like someone that gets beat quite a bit. And
so, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
As he just seems like he doesn't sustain blocks very long, and he gets beat very easily, too much more than I would like for a guy who's supposed to be a first round pick, a guy that people are like, hell yeah, if he's there at 21, let's jump up and get this guy. So I might be missing something. I'm just kind of curious where Price ranks on your list.
So
why?
I don't even have Ragnow as my number two center, to believe it or not. I have Austin Corbett as my number two center. He played tackle for Nevada, but I was down.
Yeah.
I was down at the Senior Bowl in Mobile this past January, and they had him working all over the offensive line. And when he was at center, he looked like a dominant player. He looked just as dominant as Isaiah Wynn did down there at Georgia. So he's my number two. For Price, he's behind Ragnow. He's in that fourth spot. He could be behind Mason Cole. It kind of goes back and forth to me. They're about the same player, in my opinion. So he's either 4A or 4B with Mason Cole. And I definitely get the concerns of Price because, I mean, again, 32-inch arms. You're not going to win with length very often. You're not going to be as ineffective as a zone blocker, and you're not going to sustain a lot of blocks with that length against defensive tackles who have 33, 34-inch arms and guys who are much more athletic than you. And I think that's where all the limitations come with Price. He's a gritty guy. He likes to throw guys in the dirt. He's a tough guy, and I think that's why a lot of people like him. He's a 52-game starter. He goes to Ohio State, and he's kind of like that. He's the kind of guy that coaches like and whatnot. And I think that's where a lot of the positives come in. But as a blocker and as a player, he's kind of limited, and that's where is he really a first-round prospect with those kinds of physical and athletic limitations? I don't think so. And I think one of the points that you have already said made a lot of sense. And that's where I'm kind of getting with him as well.
Again, I want to throw one other question at you. You have done obviously a lot of video for Cincy Jungle. The readers love it. You tend to get a lot of positive feedback on that. So I'm going to assume that Mike Brown is one of those readers who really loves it. So let's say in the next week, sometime between now and Thursday, knocks on your door, says, "Hey, John, we're finally going to have it, and we're going to name you our GM. So you have the 21st pick for the Cincinnati Bengals. Thursday night. Assuming we don't trade up, we don't trade down. We're kind of sitting there. The common names we've seen in most of the mock drafts, like McGlinchey, Wynn, Ragnow, Price, Daniels, Hernandez, Vea, the linebackers like Van Der Esch and Evans, and even Lamar Jackson. So all these general names that are kind of there." And he says, okay, we're turning things over. We're changing stuff. Marvin Lewis doesn't have a say. No one has a say. I don't have a say. It's up to John Sheeran. You're up there. You're giving us the card. Whose name are you putting up on that big board for Cincinnati at 21?
It's James Daniels, but I really want it to be Lamar Jackson. And here's why. For what the team is right now, I just want to get a center. I want to get the best center. I want to get the center who has legitimate Pro Bowl potential. I think that will do a lot of things for the offense. But I really want Lamar Jackson. But I don't want Lamar Jackson with Marvin Lewis still here. At this point, I just want Andy Dalton and Marvin Lewis to just be gone at the same time, I guess. And I don't want this to turn into that kind of debate. So I'll just stick with James Daniels, but know that I still want to draft Lamar. But even though I don't want him on this Bengals team, I guess.
I love the bold Lamar pick.
Yeah.
If it was Lamar, do you think he could start day one? Assuming we had a coach that started rookies?
I wouldn't. I think he's still got some work to do with his footwork and stuff like that. I think that any team that he goes to, it would be best for him to sit a year. But I definitely think that if he gets a year with a good quarterback coach, with someone who can work out some technical flaws, he can be a game breaker and someone that the Bengals haven't had in a long time.
Well, you heard it here. Lamar Jackson.
Best runner in the
Sheeran.
class, by the way.
And in case you don't know, John is on Twitter. If you are on Twitter, at John_, give your thoughts and opinions before the draft happens about him wanting Lamar Jackson on the Bengals, and maybe after if they do decide to draft him, because they recently met with him. I think it was a night or two ago. They met with him in Cincinnati and are doing their due diligence. So, and I think that's a good move. I mean, they need to look at quarterbacks. I like Matt Barkley as a backup, but if there's more talent there, you can improve it.
See Homer.
I know. I'm Cardinal Gold over here. I know. But obviously there's a lot of talent in this class at quarterback. It's very, very deep, and we'll see what the Bengals do. I guess I'm getting a lot of comments and questions in the YouTube chat, kind of about is the value there for a center at number 21, or should the Bengals go tackle? Should they go defensive tackle? Should they go linebacker? Should they go guard at 21 over center? And then maybe, I don't want to say, maybe Daniels is gone. I don't want to say settle for Ragnow or Price in the second round, third round, that sort of thing. But I mean, value-wise, do you think center is a position to take at 21?
I think Daniels would have been a good pick at 12, to be honest with you, because I think people need to understand what value actually means. A starting center plays 1,000 snaps in a season if he's like Russell Bodine and doesn't miss a snap for whatever reason. So that's obviously you playing every single snap. You're playing the third most important position on the offense. You're playing a position that was the biggest weakness on your offense for 4 years. I don't know. And plus, he has the potential to become a multiple Pro Bowl player. And he plays a position that's one of the highest paid, or it's a position that's getting paid more and more as the salary cap obviously goes up. Centers are getting paid more than running backs now. They're almost getting paid as much as wide receivers and tight ends. I don't know if that isn't value. I don't know what is, to be honest with you.
Yeah. Yeah. And the team has so undervalued the center position for so long. You would think it's time that they invest a high pick. I mean, I think we're all, for the most part, in agreement that they probably will invest a high pick. It just depends on who and in what round, but it's probably going to be, within the first two nights, I would think. Mm-hmm. Linebackers. Let's talk about linebackers and defensive tackles real quick. Obviously, there are a couple names in the first round that could be in play. Vita Vea, the big guy out of Washington, is the defensive tackle that could be in the conversation. Some believe he might be a top 10, top 12 pick. But if there's a lot of movement for quarterbacks in the first round, which we've seen happen, if there's some wackiness, maybe there's a run on a couple of different other positions, Vita Vea is maybe a guy there. Your thoughts on him teaming up next to Geno Atkins potentially and bolstering that defensive tackle group?
Vita Vea is fun. When I watched him, like the main thing that stuck out with him is that he just runs over guys, and that comes to the territory of being 340 pounds and running a 5'140. And I mean, he's just a fun player to watch because at his size, he knows what to do with his hands. He's not like a Marcus Hunt, just doing whatever. He actually has some process with throwing together counter moves and whatnot. But unfortunately, all that handwork didn't always translate into production, and then always translate into sacks. And I think that's kind of a glaring issue with him, is that he wasn't as productive as you would like a first round defensive tackle to be. And I know that Danny Shelton, guys like that, Dontari Poe, they were drafted in the top half of the first round, and they were nose tackles. They weren't really considered pass rushers. They were just, well, at least Dontari Poe. I think Poe is a good comparison for a guy like Vita Vea, just because of their size, their abilities as just a one gap stuffer, as a run defender, and just how athletic they were. But looking back, Dontari Poe's a good player. I don't think he was worth a first round pick, just because he just doesn't provide that production as a pass rusher, and it's not a guy that you would want for 3 downs on the field. So, and with that in mind, I wouldn't take Vita Vea in the first round. I would take him somewhere in the second round, just because he's got a high floor and you kind of know what you're getting with him. But in terms of, what the value is for a nose tackle compared to an interior pass rusher, it just doesn't kind of work out for me in the first round.
Yeah, and what's going to be interesting, I mean, just 2 years ago, we saw this. Everybody pegged the Bengals. I think they were at number 24 or something in the first round. Everybody pegged them. Andrew Billings. He's the defensive tackle. I mean, everybody thought they were going to take him. Well, they got him. They got him in the 4th round because there was all these concerns that he was just a 2-down player and a guy that couldn't stay on the field, in passing situations and all of that. So we might see. I don't think it's going to be something that drastic for Vea in terms of from round 1 to round 4, but who knows, because of similar concerns, he could slip to round 2. And at that point, I think the value is pretty solid, right?
Well, I think Billings kind of fell that far because I think he had some injury concerns.
Yeah, there's a knee issue as well. Yeah.
I don't think Vea is leaving the top 20, but if he does, I definitely think that the Bengals are an option, just because he had the pre-draft visit. I tweeted out earlier, like, the 8 names that I expect to be on the Bengals board. Vea was one of them. He was like 7th for me. He was just ahead of Daron Payne. I definitely think he's an option. And for any teams in the 20s, compared to where I think Vea is graded around the league, I think that's solid value for in their minds. But yeah, to me personally, I think he's just kind of like a day 2 guy that people are really overvalued.
Yeah. What about some linebackers? I mean, at that position, depending on, there's a couple of guys really, Tremaine Edmonds and Roquan Smith seem to be the 2 guys that probably will be top 10, top 15 picks. Maybe one of them sneaks to the Bengals at 21. Doubtful. But your thoughts on those 2 guys they look at 3rd round? Say they take care of centers, they take care of tackle, whatever, those first couple of rounds. And I do think they still need linebacker help. So, your thoughts on that, those 2 guys and maybe some others in the group.
I think if you somehow miraculously get Edmonds or Smith, you don't even have to worry about, Vontaze Burfict missing his mandatory 8 games a season, because either of those 2 guys can just come in and give the Bengals that same kind of that sideline to sideline ability, and even more so because both those guys are much greater athletes than Vontaze Burfict ever was or ever will be. The NFL loves Edmonds just because he's got this Anthony Barr size, but he's like 19 years old. He's a teenager, so there's obviously a lot of room for him to grow. And not only that, but there's also potential for him to, be in a 2-point stance on the line of scrimmage and rush the passer on 3rd down. And there's also a potential for him in coverage. So that's why he's like a lock to not leave the top 10. The only thing with Roquan is that, he's not 6'5", 250, he's 6'1", 235. And obviously that's not the average for the position for a middle linebacker. But at Georgia, it didn't really seem to be a problem, because he still racked up, I think, 80 solo tackles on one of the best defenses in the entire country, on a stacked defense in the SEC. He was still massively productive. He was always around the ball. When you watch him, he's just, if any team ever tried to attack the sidelines, Roquan would always be the first guy there. He was just blazing, this way, that way. He was just everywhere. And I think that's something that the Bengals definitely don't have on their defense. And it would definitely be a welcome addition to any defense as a middle linebacker, or just as a weak side guy. I think Deion Jones plus is the comp that I think needs to be established, because Deion Jones is obviously a little smaller guy, but he takes on he doesn't really take on blocks. He kind of just like gets under them and just kind of like knifes his way through gaps and whatnot. And there's definitely a lot of value in that. So I don't think either of them are going to fall, obviously, but Roquan would definitely excite me a lot. And I think as a third round guy, Fred Warner is very interesting because Jabril Peppers in Michigan, he was kind of like that Swiss Army knife, and it was used as like a safety, a slot cornerback, linebacker. That was basically Fred Warner for BYU. He was really effective in coverage, but once he was in the box as a linebacker, he looked really good as well. But his production kind of lacked because he wasn't always used as a linebacker. But I think there's definitely a high upside with him in terms of athleticism, in terms of just developing as a linebacker. I think he could become a better version of what Nick Vigil is supposed to be. I still have some hope in Nick Vigil, but I think Fred Warner would be a nice insurance policy for what Nick Vigil might not be.
Okay. This question kind of builds on what we were talking about at the beginning of the show with the Twizzlers and licorice and whatever. I'm a big junk food guy, although I tend to be more like chocolate chip cookies than soft serve ice cream.
By the way, Scott, what was your choice on that?
Oh, none of the above. If it's not, chocolate chip cookies or soft serve, Blizzard or Culver's or something, I don't know.
Oh God. All right.
But
I respect it.
So there, I think we did the show live last year during the first pick. And if there was one guy that the Bengals could have drafted last year that would made me so upset that I would not have had the stomach to finish those chocolate chip cookies or, that concrete mixer from Culver's or whatever, it would have been John Ross. And that was the guy that took. So anyway, my question is this year's draft, who would be that one guy that you've obviously looked at a lot of prospects, you've spent a lot of time, invested a lot of effort in looking at all these folks, and you kind of have in your mind, these are the guys I really like, these are the guys I like less. Who would be that one guy that if the Bengals take him at 21 that would just make you so sick to your stomach that whatever John Sheeran does when he gets upset to his stomach would happen?
Okay. Colton Miller for sure. Tackle at UCLA. I don't like Mel Kiper had him like mocked in the first round when the Bengals were still at 12 like 2 months ago. So obviously he kind of knew he was going to test well at the combine, and then he did. He tested like Lane Johnson plus, but the guy is just not good. He's just not good at football, and some team is going to fall for him, like the Bengals fell for Cedric Wade, just an athletic guy who just doesn't know what to do with his hands and just loses bounce too easily. So if the Bengals, if McGlinchey gets picked, and for some god-awful reason they still want to tackle who's not McGlinchey or Connor Williams, and they pick Colton Miller, no. I'll be sick.
Yeah, Colton Miller is one of those physical specimens athletes, but, the tape doesn't really match some of that stuff, and, he seems to be more of a project guy, so there's some people that was kind of the deal with Nate Solder when he came out. He was kind of a project guy, but he still went high to the Patriots. And, I just don't see the same kind of talent level there. I could be wrong. He could end up being a good guy, a good player for a team for a long time. But I think, this is a team, this Bengals team needs to get players, especially in the first 3 rounds, that can contribute tomorrow.
Right.
and Colton Miller doesn't seem to be a guy that would be able to. I don't know. If you want to stick around for listener questions, John, you're more than welcome. I know you've been under the weather a little bit, so if you want to stick around, we're gonna do some of those. But before we do, we are I want to ask you kind of, let's do a 3-round mock draft, a John Sheeran 3-round mock draft, and of course, you can say that there's the John Sheeran choices that I would, what I would make, but there's also, you have to put in maybe who's available, who the Bengals like, the kind of profiles the Bengals like. However you want to do it, though. Your first 3 picks, 21, 46, and actually 77. Let's do the first 4 picks, the first 3 rounds. Okay. So let's do 4 picks, and fire away.
All right, so First round, kind of like what I said, James Daniels, just get your center, get your good center, get out of the way. 46, I'm not sure he's going to be there. I don't really know what this guy's stock is at this moment, but like I said, I'm a big Justin Reed fan, and the Bengals want to go a lot of three safety sets. They need a guy to potentially take over for Denner, and if they can't get a contract done, I think he can do both those roles this year in case Denner goes down for some reason, and just take over for Denner as the slot corner, as the nickel cornerback in 2019. 77, a guy that I really like as a pass rusher is Duke Ejiofor, the pass rusher out of Wake Forest. My plan personally, what I want to see what Willis is inside, but also in Michael Johnson's last year, I would like to see him also inside just to utilize him as a pass rusher more. Maybe as Willis, maybe as more of just a first and second run defender, him switching off with Lawson. But anyways, you still need that fourth edge rusher. I think Ejiofor can come in behind Dunlap. He's one of the most pro-ready pass rushers in this draft class. He didn't test at the combine, so not a lot of people are really talking about him. But I think in the third round, he's got good value there and would really solidify the defensive line. And then the compensatory pick, get a linebacker, Fred Warner. I think his value fits pretty well there. So 4 picks, 3 really solid athletes, 4 really meaty contributors.
Yeah, and those are all good 4 picks there, and all positions that are either needs or they have or they've explored. In free agency, they flirted with 2 veteran safeties, Justin Reed's older brother Eric, and Kurt Coleman. So obviously they've got safety on the mind at some capacity, and so I think at that point you've addressed center, you've addressed that third safety at kind of a multi-functional defense there, and a pass rusher. I think that would be a pretty good haul. John, go ahead.
No, I was agreeing. I was agreeing with you, agreeing with me.
Yeah. John, how can folks get in touch with you? Obviously, they can find your stuff on SB Nation and CincyJungle.com. How can they get in touch with you? What other stuff are you going to be putting out soon in the near future? Now that draft week is upon us.
Out on Twitter, John _ Sheeran. Follow me on Instagram at the same one. I post like every 9 months or so be on the lookout for the next one in like 6 months. So that's about it. I'll have a couple more draft pieces.
Awesome.
On the Sissy Jungle, and have some draft recap stuff coming after that.
Yeah, we've got a lot of work to do, because especially if the Bengals end up keeping all 11 picks, I don't think they do personally. I think they may move around a little bit, but even though that's not really in their DNA, but I don't see 11 guys even coming close to making the team in 2018. So I think I've said this on this program before. I think this should be more about the meat and potatoes of a roster, and quality over quantity. I think should kind of be a little bit of what the Bengals are looking for this year. John, if you want to stick around, you're welcome to. We're going to spend a few minutes taking a couple of listener questions. If you want to chime in, up to you, my friend.
This is actually perfect timing. I gotta take some more meds, so I'm gonna get out of your guys' hair.
All right. All right. Well, you got the Barry White effect going tonight, dude. You've got the deep voice going. I hope you feel better. Thanks for coming on, and we'll have you on again soon. Probably after the draft to talk about some of these guys.
I'd appreciate that. Thanks for having me on, guys.
All right. Take it easy, man. That was John Sheeran with CincyJungle.com and SB Nation. Really entertaining follow on Twitter, and really entertaining writer, because he does really good film breakdown, and we were happy to have him on. Thanks for your questions. We got him to answer a couple. Scott, we're going to get out of here in just a few minutes, but we do have a couple of questions. I know you've got a special guest with you,
Yeah.
but are you able to answer a question or two before we get out of here?
I think so, as far as I can hear it. So,
okay.
Yeah, as long as I have headphones on, I should be able to hear the question.
All right. Some of these are pretty quick in terms of our potential answer. Let's see here. There was one up here that I thought was, Brandon LaFell, the question of all questions, is he going to be cut? My assumption is no. They just paid him a roster bonus. I think it was $1 million back in March or April 1st, something like that, for remaining on the roster. It seems as if the Bengals are committed to him, but they might look at a wide receiver in those middle rounds, a Josh Malone type of situation that they grabbed in the 4th round. I don't know. Do you think LaFell's still safe for 2018, Scott?
I'd say as long as Lewis is coaching, he's definitely safe. He's definitely a veteran guy. Lewis is a veteran, and there's nothing. LaFell's a veteran. There's really nothing LaFell has done to cost him his job, at least as far as like someone like Lewis would be concerned. I mean, he's not a high-end, transcendent kind of prospect, kind of young. Fans tend to gravitate more to the younger, more upside guys, but he is a solid, stable, decent number 3 who's serving as our number 2. And I think until Lewis has any sort of confidence in putting Ross on the field and Boyd taking that next step, I think LaFell's going to be there. And it kind of makes you wonder, okay, someone like Josh Malone and these other guys they have, and even putting Alex Erickson their wide receiver when he was probably like their 5th or 6th guy. I think it shows he just doesn't have a lot of confidence in younger guys. I know they'll be in their 2nd and 3rd years. Maybe Boyd gets more play. Maybe Ross gets to see some playing time. Long answer short, I'm going to say yes. LaFell, barring an injury or barring something crazy, even if he gets arrested, I think he'd still be on the team, as we saw with Pac-Man a couple years ago.
For those of you who aren't listening to the show, aren't watching the show, and getting the video and are just listening to the audio, the extra voice you just heard is a product of quote-unquote dad life, and Scott is being a good dad while also being a good podcast. He's juggling a lot, and your little guy is quite the character. He's very cute. I thought this was, and I can't believe I didn't see this earlier. I just kind of scrolled around and saw this one. You mentioned arrest, so Dean Burke. Do you guys think Johnny Football would be a better backup from day one as any guy we currently have behind Andy? And the guys they currently have behind Andy, Jeff Driscoll and Matt Barkley. Driscoll's the project guy, more of the athlete, is very raw as a quarterback. Barkley, pro-style offense in college and has had some start in the Pro League and all of that, but more of a reliable type of backup guy. I don't want Johnny Football anywhere near this team personally for a variety of reasons. I'm glad it seems he's getting his life back in order. Even though he was kind of a jerk in a number of different respects, he is getting a second chance. If he's truly turned himself around, I hope he runs with that second chance and stays out of trouble. But I don't trust that guy, and he's a little too much of an ad-libber for me in terms of what he does behind the line of scrimmage. And I don't know. But interesting question. What do you think about Johnny Football as the Bengals backup, Scott?
I think you kind of hit it well. He is an ad-libber without the talent to back it up. I mean, he's kind of like Brett Favre without the Brett Favre arm or, ability to do the things Brett Favre did, but kind of has that mentality. And I think in college you can kind of get away with it more because he had Mike Evans and was surrounded by some really good players. At the NFL level, he was exposed in that because he was a little smaller. He wasn't as running. His arm strength really wasn't as great as you would expect. And you said, I think he is who he is. It's great that he has gotten some of the worst demons, kind of pushed out of his life. But that being said, I still don't think he's a great prospect. I'm not really sold on Matt Barkley. I guess there's always a chance they draft a guy in the mid rounds. I still want to see what Jeff Driscoll can do. I was, from what we saw, obviously we didn't see all the practices, but what we saw in preseason, and I know they ran him a bit in preseason, but when he, all the reports were he seemed to be playing really well. He, finally had a chance. This is, I think, his make or break year. That either he's an NFL backup or he's not. And if he's not, I think they need to, move on. But they've kept him on the roster for a couple years for a reason. And I think that reason is they possibly see something. So I personally, I'd rather see what they have in Jeff Driscoll than see what we have in Manziel, because I think I know what there is in Manziel, and I just don't think it's, NFL worthy.
Yeah, I just don't think it's worth the headache. And this is a team that just not only needs immediate contributors in a number of different areas on their football team, but they need guys who are serious about football. And one of their best players can't seem to stay on the field regularly, be it from injuries or suspensions or whatever, and Vontaze Burfict. And I just don't think bringing more of those types of players in, especially at the most important position on your football team, well, the second most important position, I guess, backup quarterback, whatever, the most important position group on the team. I don't think it's a good idea. And, the Bengals are already kind of, fair or not, they've already kind of got this reputation of housing these type of people. And I don't think that would go over well in a lot of different respects. Let's do one more, and then we'll get out of here. Let's see. There was a couple here. I guess we'll go with this one. It's from, I hope I'm saying this right, Taylor Esget. If somehow Calvin Ridley falls to the Bengals, would he be worth the pick? I'm assuming that means 21 overall. Calvin Ridley largely looked at as the best wide receiver prospect in this year's draft. Again, that kind of goes back to the first question about LaFell being cut and all of that. It depends on his development. It depends on Josh Malone's development. I would not want that pick at number 21, just like I don't think I would want a corner at number 21. I think this team needs different positions to be addressed. Your thoughts on Calvin Ridley potentially being the pick at 21? So like it.
I'll be honest, I really have not looked into him much, only because for the sentiment you kind of rang, there's really no reason that you want to see them draft a wide receiver with the first round pick. One, with all the other issues they have, especially offensive line, they have linebacker, they could improve at safety, so on and so forth. Plus, on top of that, you then have, you just spent a top 10 pick on a receiver last year. You used a second round pick on a receiver the year before. You've also invested multiple mid-round picks, late-round picks on guys like Cody Core, guys like Josh Malone. And then you still have, Brandon LaFell on the roster. So you've kind of done, a pretty full investment in wide receiver. That I think the last thing fans would want to see is another first-round pick on a wide receiver. I think it's one of those positions that, you just don't want to see them use in any shape or form, unless it's, the next Larry Fitzgerald. But if it's the next Larry Fitzgerald, or Calvin Johnson, still not what you need. Still might be a crazy pick.
There's not those guys in this draft. You know what I mean?
And
that's not that guy.
21 if it is him. So I don't think there's any reason they should be looking at a wide receiver, I would hope, in the first 3 rounds.
Yeah, I think the earliest you look is maybe in the 3rd round, maybe with that compensatory pick, and I think that's more of a best player available. Say you got your center, you got your linebacker, you got your you got a defensive lineman, that sort of thing, maybe a secondary player. I think at that point maybe you can decide to go best player available, and maybe wide receivers in play there. But I think you're looking day 3 for a wide receiver. I think there's too many. It's so weird to say because this team is so deep in a lot of different areas, but I just, there are glaring needs, and wide receiver just does not appear to be one. Yes, they struggled getting guys to produce opposite of A.J. Green, but that was without John Ross. That was with a raw Josh Malone, and now you're hoping offensive coordinators back for a second consecutive season. Ross hopefully is healthy. He's been working out. Malone, second season in the system. Boyd, 3rd season in the with the Bengals. You kind of hope that things start to gel a little bit, and you know, you've invested, as Scott mentioned, significant draft capital over the past 2 drafts at wide receiver. I don't think you need to do it again this year. I think it's more, you know, day 3, maybe a project guy that could supplant a Cody Core on the roster, and Alex Erickson, maybe a return type of guy, an Alex Erickson replacement type of player. On day 3, you can do some special teams things, maybe be a project and be a contributor at some level. I think that's maybe what you look for as you address other needs on this in this class. This is the Orange and Black Insider Bengals podcast. We had John Sheeran on the program from SB Nation and Cincy Jungle. Thanks to him. Thanks to my co-host Scott Schultze, and we had another special guest, Scott's little one, joined the program and gave his 2 cents on some of the questions of the night. Thank you to everybody who tuned in live and who submitted questions. I have not, usually I say this throughout the program, but I have not done so yet. You can get this program in a number of different ways: on SoundCloud, on iTunes. All of our stuff's on cincyjungle.com. You can get in touch with the program via Twitter at BengalsOBI. You can get in touch with us via email, theobinsider@gmail.com. We appreciate all the support. We appreciate all of the feedback. I know that the audio the past couple of episodes has been a little scratchy. I hope it was better this time around. I didn't get any feedback of the negative variety. There's a couple of little jumps that are kind of normal when you do the online hangout session, but I hope that the scratchiness was not part of the episode tonight, and we appreciate that you're still sticking with us despite a couple of episodes of rough audio. Hopefully it's better this time around, and you know, I'm seeing some comments in our chat. You know, talk about, you know, Samuel Peterson, great show, thank you. There's another gentleman in here that mentioned he liked the podcast too, and we recognize your compliments and we thank you for them. Stick with us. We're going to talk a lot. I did see a question, I believe it was from Christopher Higdon, asking if we are going to do a live draft program next week. And I'm sorry to say that there's a lot of stuff going on. And last year, the Bengals picking top 10. That was kind of an earlier evening type of thing. Now they're picking at 21. Yes, they could move up or whatever, but it's going to be quite late for a lot of folks. So as of now, I don't think it's an overwhelming desire that we do a live show. And there's a lot of feedback that people want to do that. And we'll be awake at that point. We'll think about it. I do know we'll be doing a lot of stuff on cincyjungle.com, including Facebook live sessions to talk about the pick. I will probably be doing that, if not somebody else with the site. So that will be a live analysis or a live session of sorts. We'll also be doing that throughout the entire weekend. So check it out. If you haven't liked Cincy Jungle on Facebook, do that. And you can find those live sessions. You get alerted to those, and we'll talk about the picks, field questions, all that kind of stuff. So check that out. Check out all the posts there. Download this program. Thanks so much for your support. We'll see you next episode. We're a week away from the draft. Thanks, guys.